gives it to
I
you.
don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Smart.
Okay, so in Daniel Mitchell's article, The American Dream is Alive, he says, these features, which I believe he's talking about open and deregulated markets, because that's what he says right above that, mean that poor people have considerable opportunity to climb the ladder, limited only by their talents, abilities, and willingness to work hard. I read that, and I thought about Bender's article, which was reaching the American dream is harder for people of color, and I'm thinking, BS, Mr. Mitchell, because we have these two people who are in such horrible debt because they've been working hard for 20 years, and they're still getting paid $7.75 an hour. And so I don't agree with Mr. Mitchell when he says that all you have to do is work hard, and you're going to attain that American dream. Feedback.
Well, I mean, just my initial claim, I always had trouble with every time I hear this phrase American Dream. Because, and I guess that's what we're trying to do, but there's always, what is that? What does that even mean? And I don't think it has a definition, and I just think it's always been subjective or arbitrary. So just attainable for some in relation to what they value. And this is what I was getting at with her, that it's different for different people. Now, is it Kuntz? Where she was talking about competency, and that's where it is like definition is different people, and competency I should find it was being comfortable and independent, right? Now, for me, as soon as I buy my house when I go down there, I think I'm living the American dream. My passion for teaching, I'm comfortable and I'm confident. But if Tyler Perry maybe was in my same shoes, I don't know if he's so happy or comfortable, right? So that's what I'm saying. I think just different. I like how Kuntz was saying if hard work was a staple of achieving the American dream, then we have to make sure hardworking people can afford to have this competency of what said there. But I'll stop.
Oh, I guess I would want us to sort of, the way I kind of read these and think about these, I think the word dream is really interesting because dreams happen when you're sleeping and they don't happen in the real world, and they're very ephemeral, and they're not quantifiable, they're hard to tell. And I think what these articles are revealing is that the concept of the American dream is fading and changing, and it is not the same thing that it once was. And I agree with some of the articles that were basically stating that it happened and it was achievable for a certain generation at a certain time. But we now exist in a system that still continues to exploit people. Particularly, I was drawn to that article about the hardworking man in California with the predatory lending, because one of the things I was thinking about is that the American dream can't be built off of crushing others. And so while the banks and the Wall Street and Main Street are succeeding in achieving their American dream, it's at the expense of exploiting and killing someone else's American dream. But, I think if I wanted us to talk about a different topic, I would actually do the flip side of what was first mentioned about Arethia's comment about the Wilson article, the man whose father died and mother died and then went into the military, because this is not, while the GI Bill still exists and people do use the military as means of upward mobility, a lot of what I was reading in this article was interesting, and it was talking about how upholding masculinity is part of the American dream as well. Yeah. And I was thinking about reading this lens not through the American dream, but through the concept of gender, and how this is about him. The American dream that's created is about a man supporting his family and his children and his wife, and creating this sort of idea of what it means to be a man. And I just think that we're also living in a time in which that's being redefined and rethought of what even a family is and what family can be. So, I don't know, that's just what I'd want us to think about, is how the dream is changing a little bit.
So I think you're right that it's changing in how it is expressed, but I think at the core of what it is really hasn't. That Wilson says the American dream means more than being rich. And I was also thinking about what Mitchell said about, there's still people from all over the world who want to be here. There's still, even if they're not achieving what we see as the American dream, the majority of the time they're better off than where they were.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that upward mobility is still there, even if it's not as far up. But the thing I keep hitting on, I keep thinking back to my grandfather, was like, he was a sharecropper, and he was one of like 12 kids. Because they used to just have kids so they'd have more hands to work on the farm, you know. He didn't even have a name, he had 2 initials, like they were tired of naming kids, so WR, that's it. So he was so poor he couldn't afford a name as a joke. But he moved to Chicago, and he used to say that like when he left Tennessee, he had a suitcase and a ham sandwich and $10 in his pocket. He ate the ham sandwich, someone stole the suitcase, and now he's $30,000 in debt on a house. He feels like he's doing pretty good for himself. But he always had felt like he had achieved the American dream, but for him, it wasn't about the home ownership or the ability to provide for the family so much as that freedom of self-determination. Like, my circumstances don't hold me back. And I think in the U.S., even though we do have, certain areas where people's circumstances do create a bigger challenge, I do think we have created an environment where people can rise above their circumstances and can, you know, achieve self-determination. And I think so, even though the whole I'm the man in this house and I support my wife and kids and I own my home might be fading into something else, I think everybody's still trying to determine their own future, and that's what the dream really is. Take the ball.
You wanted to speak. I have nothing right now.
I was just gonna say, well, because we don't have to follow a set pattern, but I was just
No,
gonna
we
say
don't.
I really disagree with that in the sense that the more I actually read and learn about America and actually see what happens, I don't actually think that there's chances for upward mobility, and I don't think that we have systems set up to actually help people. I think about, I remember watching a documentary about this man who was trying to support homeless people, and he walked from Atlanta to DC. There was a lot of news stories about him, but you know, one of the things that's really hard for homeless people to do is actually get a job.
Mm-hmm.
They all want to work, and they, you know, the common misconception we have is that homeless people are lazy and they don't want to work. But the reality is that but when you don't have a home address, or you don't have a phone number, or you don't have any place to even, you know, to wash your clothes every night so that you can go back to work the next day clean. I just think, you know, I'm thinking about this line here where he says, granted, 2015, very different world right now, but that that America is still the envy of the developed world. But I don't really believe that. I don't agree with that. Where our mortality rate for women having children, especially African American women, is like dreadful. Our education system is like incredibly poor compared to a lot of the world. Cuba has better healthcare than America does. I mean, maybe I'm slanted by my Michael Moore documentary viewings, but you know, there's a lot that's wrong with America, and I think our inability to be honest about what's wrong causes a lot of problems. And I think this is where we're too stuck in the concept of a dream instead of a reality. Let's make an American reality, not an American dream. It's kind of like I would push back.
I get it. I just think I'm just on a whole different of just like, you know, as I said before, like, it's just, what is it? I really think that the question should be, because of course the question is the modern American dream attainable?
Mm-hmm.
Is the American dream attainable for everyone, right? Like, so getting at what I was saying, like, so Spence, he said there are multiple American dreams, going back to point I was making, but he was saying because for people of color, it's not just the upward mobility part or aspect, right? It's the racial equality part. And you were one of my 3 comments too when you were talking about the whole integration. That was an answer thing as well. But I kind of, in what you were just saying, I actually think I disagree in the sense of when it comes down to a lot of poor people, it does breed laziness. And what breeds laziness? When you don't have job opportunities, right? That causes government assistance. They call, you know, all this stuff. I think it does breed laziness to a point. Now, everyone, you know, I don't never want to speak in general terms, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
generalizing, you know, blanket terms. But where there are some people who, okay, well, if I'm going to keep getting this assistance, you know, since I couldn't get a job opportunity, I'm going to take this welfare card. If I am going to keep getting assistance, then I don't want to work, you know. So I think that affects that as well. But once again, I just think going back to also with Wilson, was that the one with the men?
Yeah.
and kind of what you were saying, was this the grandfather,
Mhm.
right? With your grandfather, if you looked at the way that she described her life or the way your grandfather described it, I think most people would kind of be like if they just asked, like if you told that story and said, so is this person living an American dream? No, what are you talking about? This person, they went through all this trouble or they went, but I think it just gets back to my point that it just looks different for everyone. Like she said that her husband or her dad? Her dad is living this American dream because he, I think got his GED and, support his family, but I don't know what else to say.
Two things. I think. Oh shoot, I forgot. No, and that was the thing with my grandfather. Like it didn't just change his life; it changed like my whole family. So now all of a sudden, like we're college educated. We look at we're not dirt farmers like he was. All his brothers and sisters still dirt farmers. Like I've got cousins in Tennessee that I probably would not get along with, or understand, But back to what you were saying. I know we've got all these problems, and I think sometimes we focus so much on the problems that we have that we need to put some effort into fixing that we forget some of the things that we are doing well. I mean, our healthcare system ain't great, but we still have people that come from all over the world to learn medicine here and to get treated here because I've spent a good year with people from Great Britain and Australia and Denmark and France and talking to them about the way their country's working, and there's still a sense of awe about America and wanting to come to America and see America firsthand. So I know when I think about comparing us with education and healthcare, it's hard to compare us to other nations because it's just the systems are so different. There are things we definitely need to fix, and I'm not saying that everything's hunky-dory, but I think there are certain things and freedoms and ideas of self-determination that we've got that, Australia has a much better healthcare system than we do. And my Australian friends are like, man, I would love to live in America. And my buddy of mine that's a Brit that emigrated there from South Africa is like, I still want to come live with you sometime for a year or two. So I've seen it in action, and there's still that sense.
And I think Mitchell backed you up when he said perfect isn't the enemy of good.
Right. I think I wrote that down.
That's right.
That's a good quote.
And I think
Or I meant to.
right. But I think when you think of American Dream,
Yeah.
that's what you think of, perfection. Well, I think that's what society pushes at. It's supposed to be this perfect thing, but if you don't look at it that way, then you could say it is attainable. But the way that it's presented is kind of like, how?
And we have systems that help. There are tons of stories of people that rose above. It's just we don't get everybody, and maybe we don't get enough. And we've got so many stories of people that never got out or were denied opportunities or didn't make it. But for all those stories, there are also stories of people that there were helping hands that came either from the government or from a private benefactor or from a community. There's all kinds of Alexander Hamiltons out there still to this day that are rising above, that are rising up.
And I think Australia have better gun laws too, but I'm not going to get into that. All right.
My Australian buddy says otherwise.